Hey there, just a heads up, this episode of the Judo Science Podcast was created with help from AI. Some of the voices you'll hear are synthetic, but the ideas come from real research and real judo.
Well, today we are taking a massive, dense stack of research and distilling it just for you.
And it is quite the stack today. I mean, we are looking at a literal mountain of evidence pulling from multiple decades of sports science and medical literature.
We really are. We're talking about data covering over 420,000 individual fights.
Which is an insane sample size.
It's massive. Plus 20-year longitudinal studies tracking elite athletes through their entire careers and some seriously hard biomechanical data.
Yeah.
And our mission today, we're taking all of this to extract the surprising truth about human physics, injury, and survival in high-contact sports.
Right. Specifically, we're looking at judo today.
Exactly. Now, we all know judo is famously translated as the gentle way, and it's built around these explosive throws. But as you dive into this research, you start to see the hidden mechanics of what happens to the human body when it collides with gravity and momentum. Okay, let's unpack this.
So to give you a calm, analytical overview of the baseline risk we're dealing with here, judo is firmly categorized in the medical literature as a moderately high-risk sport.
Okay.
To put that in perspective, mixed martial arts carries an injury rate that is roughly 4 to 10 times higher.
4 to 10 times?
Yeah, MMA is significantly more dangerous overall. However, judo is demonstrably riskier than a purely ground-based grappling sport like Brazilian jiu-jitsu. That single act of lifting and slamming introduces severe strain mechanisms that ground-based grappling simply does not generate.
But before anyone listening decides to, cancel their gym membership, we should look at the actual day-to-day reality of that risk.
Definitely.
Because despite how violent a high-speed throw looks, the chance of actually needing a medic during a top-level competition event is remarkably low.
Yeah, it's surprisingly low.
You might think the medical staff are working overtime, but out of 100 competitors at a top-tier event, maybe 1 or 2 actually need a doctor. We're talking 1.1 to 2.5%.
And if we filter that down to truly serious injuries,
The catastrophic one.
right, the kind of catastrophic events that require an immediate trip to the hospital, those occur in less than 0.5% of all competitors.
Less than 0.5%.
It is incredibly rare. But there is a vital caveat in the data. When things do go wrong in this sport, they go spectacularly wrong.
Right.
The low overall odds are balanced out by the severe trauma of the mechanisms when they finally fail.
That actually brings up a fascinating point about where these failures happen. If you're picturing an athlete blowing out their knee under the bright lights of a gold medal match.
Which is what everyone assumes.
Exactly, but the data flips that assumption entirely on its head. A massive 71% of injuries happen during everyday training. It's not the grand finale. It's the Tuesday night grind. It is the cumulative toll of thousands upon thousands of repetitions.
It's entirely about the volume of exposure, but it's also highly dependent on who is taking those falls. The sources reveal what we can call the experience shield.
The experience shield, I like that term.
Novices are the ones getting hurt the most, by a very wide margin. Mathematically, the more years of experience an athlete has on the mat, the fewer injuries they sustain.
Which feels a little counterintuitive at first glance.
It does.
You'd think the longer you spend in a heavy-impact, high-velocity sport, the more broken down your body becomes over time.
You would think so. But experts have spent years internalizing how to yield to force rather than fight it. They don't fight the physics of the fall.
They just roll with it.
Literally. Novices do the opposite. They panic, they stiffen up, they resist the momentum of the throw, and that rigid resistance is exactly what breaks bones and tears ligaments.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We found this wild statistic in the sources regarding the medical staff in the dojo. It's the athletic trainer paradox.
This one is fascinating.
Having a professional athletic trainer on your team actually increases your odds of reporting an injury by 1.7 times.
It sounds like a complete typo in the research when you first read it.
Right.
But there are 2 logical reasons driving this number. The first is simply reporting bias.
Sure.
If there is a professional trainer standing right there on the edge of the mat, every minor scrape, tweak, and bruise gets officially logged into the data system.
Because without them, an athlete just goes home, puts a bag of frozen peas on their knee, and completely forgets about it.
Exactly. But the second reason is much more psychological. It is a phenomenon called risk compensation.
Right. It's like the psychology behind wearing a seatbelt making some people drive faster, or wearing a helmet making someone tackle harder.
Exactly that mechanism. An athlete tweaks their ankle, and the athletic trainer puts a highly supportive professional tape job on it and hands them a brace.
So they feel invincible.
Because they now have that mechanical support and temporary pain management, they ignore their body's natural warning signs. They walk right back out onto the mat and train at full intensity. They end up turning a minor structural hurt into a major catastrophic failure because the trainer inadvertently gave them the confidence to override their own biological limits.
The sources highlight a massive overtraining risk that goes way beyond joint damage. Athletes who train more than 5 days a week are 5.1 times more likely to fall ill.
We aren't just talking about sore muscles or general fatigue here either. The data points to systemic immunological failures. Grapplers pushing themselves that hard develop severe digestive issues, deep skin infections like staph or ringworm, and chronic respiratory problems.
This from overtraining.
Yes. Subjecting the body to that level of physical stress day after day leads to a chronically suppressed immune system. The body diverts all its resources to structural repair and simply stops defending against pathogens.
So the daily grind in the dojo is dangerous, and pushing through the pain is a trap. Let's look at the actual physics of the throw. When that 71% of injuries do happen, the target zones are overwhelmingly the extremities.
Almost always.
Nearly 3/4 of all injuries involve the arms and legs, primarily the knees and the shoulders, and over 42% of these are soft tissue sprains, specifically ligament tears.
And ligament tears are the absolute nightmare scenario for any athlete because they dictate the longest career downtime and usually require surgical interventions. But the mechanism behind these tears is crucial to understand. In a throw, you have an attacker generating the force and a defender receiving it. But the medical data reveals that shoulders are actually 1.8 times more likely to be injured while defending a throw than attacking.
That stiffness you mentioned earlier with novices, that plays a huge role here, doesn't it?
A massive role.
The brain realizes it's falling, the panic sets in, and the athlete posts a straight, rigid arm out to the mat to try and stop the fall.
The physics just completely shatters the joint capsule. Now, if we move down to the lower body, the risk profile actually flips. The attacker is the one in extreme danger of structural failure. The sources flag two specific techniques as absolute destroyers of the attacker's anterior cruciate ligament, the ACL.
The knee destroyers.
Yes. The worst offender is uchimata, the inner thigh throw. This single technique accounts for a staggering 46% of all ACL injuries in the sport.
Nearly half of all ACL tears from one single move. But reading through the biomechanical breakdown, it makes terrifying sense. The attacker steps in, plants all their weight on one single leg, and then swings their other leg up while rotating their entire torso violently to lift a heavy, resisting opponent. And the other major culprit is taiotoshi, the body drop, where the attacker blocks their opponent's legs with their own extended leg, basically turning their knee into a rigid wall that 200 pounds falls directly onto.
It is pure structural failure under load. And there is a demographic finding in this data regarding those ACL tears that completely flips what we know about general sports injuries.
The gender equalizer.
Yes.
This really stood out to me. If you look at general sports like soccer or basketball, female athletes tear their ACLs 3 to 6 times more often than male athletes.
Which is a huge disparity.
It is. The sports science usually attributes this to subtle anatomical differences, like wider hips altering the Q angle of the knee and putting more stress on the ligament. But in elite judo, the injury rate for men and women is exactly the same.
Because the physics of the sport simply eclipse those anatomical subtleties. When a 90-kilogram opponent collapses sideways onto your planted, locked knee, the sheer catastrophic force is so universally high that your baseline anatomy becomes irrelevant. Biology is completely overridden by gravity and momentum.
But the good news for you listening is that athletes aren't helpless against this physics. The sources outline a brilliant, practical biomechanical fix for a throw called usotogari, the major outer reap. Normally, when someone tries to sweep your leg, your instinct is to lock that leg straight and form a rigid defense. And just like we established, a rigid structure snaps.
Right.
But if you take a slight yielding step backward as they attack, just giving them an inch of ground, it unlocks the knee. The data shows this drops the torque on the joint from 58 newton meters all the way down to 31.
It nearly cuts the destructive force in half.
Just from a slight step.
And it does something else critically important biomechanically. That yielding step actively engages your hamstring muscle. The hamstring pulls the shin bone backward, which acts as a natural biological shield for the ACL. You are using technique and muscle engagement to armor your own joint against the torque.
That yielding technique is vital for the knees, but it is just as crucial when we look at the most important armor of all, protecting the brain.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about gravity, the head, and the massive myth of neck strength. That same throw we just mentioned, Osotogari, is incredibly dangerous for the person being thrown. The data points to it being responsible for 50% of all severe head injuries, particularly for novices with under 3 years of experience.
Half of all severe head injuries.
And the 3D motion analysis explains exactly why. In a bad fall, the novice's body hits the mat after their head reaches its lowest point.
The timing of the fall is completely inverted. The lowest point the head reaches in that specific throw is only 0.18 meters from the ground.
18 centimeters, that's nothing.
Your body is supposed to hit the mat first to absorb and disperse the shock wave. But the novice is effectively whipping their head into a tiny 18-centimeter gap while their torso is still suspended in the air.
And this brings us to the biggest myth in contact sports. If you ask almost anyone in a gym how to protect your head in a contact sport, they will tell you to build a massive, thick, strong neck.
What's fascinating here is that researchers rigorously tested that exact assumption.
They actually measured it.
Yes. They measured raw, static neck strength in athletes and compared it to head acceleration during these high-impact falls. They found being able to lift heavy weights with your neck muscles provided no guaranteed protection against these rapid impacts.
So if it isn't raw muscle mass acting as a shock absorber, what actually saves the brain from hitting the skull?
It is entirely about neuromuscular timing. It is the speed of the cervical muscle contraction.
The speed.
Experts don't necessarily have stronger necks. They have profound neuromuscular proficiency. The split second they realize their center of gravity is gone, muscle memory initiates an instantaneous contraction that stabilizes the head before it can whip backward.
But there's a catch, and the sources point out the absolute enemy of that timing, which is fatigue.
Physical exhaustion completely destroys that neuromuscular timing. Your muscles might still theoretically be strong enough to hold your head, but the electrical signal from your brain is lagging.
Which explains so much.
It perfectly explains the data, showing that the final minute of a match sees skyrocketing injury rates. The athlete is simply too tired to fire those stabilizing muscles fast enough. Furthermore, the researchers found that unexpected attacks completely short-circuit a novice's cognitive processing.
The researchers actually simulated that surprise element by making novices do a mental math test while falling.
Which is a hilarious experiment to visualize.
It's an incredible visual. But it proved that when your brain is distracted by surprise or cognitive load, your physical reaction time plummets, leading to massive, uncontrolled head impacts. And we have to be clear about what kind of impact is actually destroying the brain here. The sources detailed a crash test dummy study comparing linear force to rotational force.
Linear force is just the direct straight-line impact. The study showed that a skilled judoka doing a proper breakfall reduces that linear g-force down to just 10.3 g.
And the limit for concussion is what?
The standard threshold for a concussion is usually around 98 g. So proper yielding technique makes the linear impact entirely safe.
But rotational force, the twisting motion, that is what is truly lethal.
Rotational acceleration acts like taking a block of gelatin and twisting the top and bottom in opposite directions. It shears the neural connections and blood vessels inside the brain tissue.
That's horrifying.
When a novice fails to control their body in the air, that rotational twist spikes into the catastrophic danger zone. And I must warn anyone listening, throwing extra padding, like a soft undermat, beneath the tatami does absolutely nothing to stop this dangerous rotational twist.
Because it only helps with linear force.
Exactly. Padding only softens a straight linear blow. It cannot stop the deadly shearing of the brain inside the skull.
That total body control is your only real protection. Let's move from the head down to the hands. Because if we are looking at where the daily, grinding structural damage happens, the sources call the gripping game an absolute meat grinder.
The meat grinder is a perfect term for it.
For male judokas, the hands are consistently the most commonly injured body part.
It makes complete sense when you look at the structure of a match. Grip fighting takes up to 28% of the entire contest. And the uniform, the gi, is not soft cotton.
No, it's heavy, stiff, high-friction canvas armor.
Your fingers get deeply trapped in the folds and lapels of this fabric.
And then your opponent violently yanks away to break the grip. The medical review describes the mechanism horribly well. It's forced hyperextension against active flexion.
Right.
Your brain is telling your fingers to clench shut with maximum effort, and a 200-pound person is simultaneously using their hips and back to rip those joints backward.
The small tendons of the hand are guaranteed to lose that structural tug of war. But what is truly remarkable is what happens to these athletes' hands over decades of this repeated trauma. A 20-year longitudinal study of elite athletes revealed a condition the researchers practically describe as zombie hands.
Zombie hands. The x-rays in the source material are wild to look at. It's massive polyarthrosis, basically severe, widespread arthritis that completely eats away the joint space.
Just gone.
The athletes develop these huge, gnarly bone spurs called Heberdin's and Bouchard's nodes all over their knuckles. The fingers look incredibly thick and permanently bent.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is bizarre, fascinating functional adaptation.
How so?
If you or I had x-rays that looked like that, we would be in agonizing pain just trying to hold a pen. Yet these elite athletes report almost zero pain and absolutely no loss of function for their specific sport.
Their bodies literally build permanent calcified bone structures around the damage.
The deformity permanently restricts their normal range of motion, meaning they can't fully open their hands flat anymore, but it turns their fingers into highly stable grappling hooks.
Permanent grappling hooks.
Yes, it is an extreme biological adaptation to an extreme environment.
But assuming you want to be able to type on a keyboard or comfortably hold a coffee cup when you retire, the sources provide two massive prevention strategies to save your hands from that fate. First, use a binary grip.
This is crucial.
You must either hold on with 100% maximum muscle engagement or you let go completely. The research shows that injuries almost always happen in the relaxed middle ground where your muscles aren't fully locked, allowing the sudden force to bypass the muscle belly and snap the ligament.
And the second strategy is a highly specific method of preventative taping.
The stick-to-stick method.
Right.
You don't just wrap tape around the knuckle like a bandage. You use a half-inch wide strip of tape and weave it in a figure-8 pattern over the webbing between the fingers, sticking the adhesive directly to itself so it won't slip off when you start sweating.
Very smart.
This tape essentially acts as an external check rein ligament. It allows you to close your fist to grip the gi, but physically blocks the finger from being bent backward into hyperextension.
Those are incredibly practical biomechanical tools for anyone in a grappling sport. But as we move into the final data set, we have to address a danger that tape and technique cannot fix. It is the invisible opponent that athletes fight before they ever step onto the mat.
You are talking about rapid weight loss. This was without a doubt the darkest data in the entire stack of sources. The sheer scale of the problem is staggering. 89% of non-heavyweight athletes actively cut weight to compete against smaller opponents. And they are starting this dangerous process as young as 12 years old.
The methods they use to achieve this dehydration are extreme. They train in plastic sweatsuits, abuse diuretics and laxatives, and an astonishing 46.9% of these athletes rely on spitting. They literally sit for hours, forcing themselves to generate saliva to drain their bodily fluids gram by gram into a cup.
It is absolute self-sabotage, and the cognitive toll is immediate.
Severe dehydration physically chokes off blood flow to the telencephalon. That is the brain's strategy and complex decision-making center. At the exact same time, your nerve conduction velocity drops. The actual electrical signals traveling through your nervous system measurably slow down.
The sources refer to what happens next as becoming a fast-twitch idiot.
It's an apt, if blunt, clinical description. Because the body is highly stressed and flooded with adrenaline, your baseline startle reflex remains incredibly fast. But because your brain's processing ping is so delayed from the dehydration, you can't analyze what you are actually reacting to. You react instantly to fakes and feints, making terrible strategic decisions that lead right into a devastating throw.
You're just reacting blindly.
Exactly. And on top of that cognitive decline, your isometric grip strength simply plummets. You are starving yourself to be stronger in a lower weight class, but you step onto the mat weaker, slower, and cognitively impaired.
And if losing your grip strength and your strategic mind wasn't bad enough, the internal physical damage is catastrophic.
I must point out a stark reality based on this medical data. The sources show that these acute, rapid weight cuts cause an athlete's creatinine levels to spike to 177.
What's the baseline for that?
For context, a healthy baseline is under 100. At a level of 177, you aren't just severely dehydrated, you are putting yourself into acute kidney injury. And repeating that trauma multiple times a year is a direct, documented pathway to chronic kidney disease later in life.
That's tragic.
They are permanently destroying their internal organs for a temporary numerical advantage on a scale.
Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground today. Let's pull all of this together and synthesize it for you. The ultimate shortcut to understanding safety in high-contact sports, and really any high-impact environment, is realizing that biology and physics simply cannot be cheated.
Never.
The traditional concept of the gentle way actually works perfectly, but only when you respect the underlying mechanics. You have to use technique. Taking a yielding step to an attack to lower the torque on your knees, utilizing precise neuromuscular timing rather than raw strength to stop rotational shearing forces to your brain, and using a binary grip to protect your hands from becoming permanent grappling hooks.
Right.
You cannot rely on rigid brute strength because against gravity and momentum, brute strength breaks. So what does this all mean?
This raises an important question, and as a final thought I want to leave directly with you. We have just explored overwhelming medical evidence showing that rapid weight loss severely damages an athlete's brain processing, destroys their grip strength, and places them in acute kidney failure.
Yeah.
They are quite literally ruining the very athletic performance they are starving themselves to improve. Given all this clear, undeniable medical evidence, should combat sports completely abandon the tradition of weight classes entirely and instead mandate minimum hydration testing right before a fight to force athletes to compete at their actual natural size?
It is a profound question that could change the landscape of sports safety entirely. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We really encourage you to think about how these biomechanical truths apply to your own body, your own physical pursuits, and how you approach stress and recovery. Stay curious, stay safe, and we will catch you next time.
Next time on the Judo Science Podcast, Episode 40, Rapid Weight Loss in Judo. Is it worth the risk?